So you're trying to link GA4 to Looker Studio and you're getting these errors in your dashboard. Well, you're in the right place. Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Leon. I believe analytics is for everyone, and I'm convinced that working with data is crucial to becoming a better decision maker in your daily work. And today, we're going to talk about the quota error in Looker Studio. And specifically, I want to talk about solutions to that problem. So the past few months, I did a deep dive into every possible solution that I could find. And I'm ready to share some of that information here with you today. So I'm in the Looker Studio dashboard right now. Let's show real quickly what doesn't work anymore. So we're all on the same page. Usually we would add data from the Google Analytics connector itself. Let me add two data sources and then we'll talk about the problems with this connector. So I just added two data sources, one from my own website, one from the Google Merchandise Store. And what we see right away, the Google Merchandise Store API quota are already exhausted. So we already get this, this quota error. Besides the quota error, this connector has different downsides. First of all, it's really slow on larger data sets. Second, it doesn't have all the metrics and dimensions available. So for instance, if you want to pull the session duration from this dashboard or landing page, it's not there. So using the default connector is not ideal. Well, you would say that there are many third-party connectors available, and that's true. So if I go into Add Data Source and I'm going to look at Google Analytics 4, you will find a lot of different third-party connectors. So personally, I've tried this Google Analytics 4 connector by Supermetrics because I've had good experience with Supermetrics in the past, and because on their site they explain that they pull data from the Google Analytics 4 API a little bit more efficiently, and therefore that would solve the quota error. However, I found that on a slightly larger, more complex dashboard that this is not the case. I still get a lot of quota error, and I found the information on their site a bit misleading. So I do not recommend using this connector, and I recommend to be careful using any third-party connector at all. And also Google, in their documentation, they give some solutions to this error. For instance, they give the advice to reduce the traffic to the report, so to share the report with fewer people. I find this not a good advice, because the dashboard is meant to be shared, with a lot of people. And also they advise to reduce the number of charts on each page. And of course, that's also not a good solution. We want to make data available, and we do not want to be limited by some kind of quota error. So the real solution is not to connect Looker Studio directly to GA4, but to create some kind of database in between that pulls data from GA4 on some kind of scheduled way that does not put a lot of load on the API, and then to connect your Looker Studio dashboard onto that database. And I found three strategies, from like really simple but also a little bit limited to really advanced and also very flexible, that can help you achieve this. Let's go over these three strategies real quick. So the first strategy is to export your data from GA4 into a spreadsheet and then connecting Looker Studio to that spreadsheet. And although this route has some limitations, it's also very affordable, and it can help you move quickly without purchasing some kind of complicated solution. And an added benefit of this route is that your dashboards will be lightning fast. So you would use spreadsheets typically if you have smaller data sets, or if you do not want to make a big investment and you're willing to make some kind of compromise to get your dashboard done quickly. That said, this route has also some big limitations. For instance, you have a limited amount of fields per sheet. So the limit that Google Sheets has is 10 million cells. This means that you will need to generate many different tables to get one dashboard done. And therefore, this solution is not really suited if you want to share that data that you exported with other departments within your organization. So you will make exports that are suited for your dashboard only. But if you want to share that data somehow with other departments, I recommend that you find a different solution. Another downside of this method is that it takes a lot of work. In many cases, you will need to create a separate sheet for every chart on your dashboard. And lastly, some metrics will be off if you use this metric. For instance, user count, but also your engagement rate and some other ratios that you would typically use in GA4. Those ratios will probably be off if you export it via a spreadsheet. And I will go into this a little bit more in detail later on in this video, and I will give you some tips on how you can work around these issues. So the second strategy is that you export your GA4 data into BigQuery using some kind of third-party tool. And while this has way less limitations, you should expect to pay at least $300 a month to get this working. Well, the advantages of this strategy is that it can handle a lot larger data sets. You're not limited to 10 million cells like Google Sheets. You can import a lot more data sets. Also, if you use BigQuery as your data source, your dashboards will be very fast. The data sets that you export from GA4 into BigQuery will then be available for other departments that they can pull their data from that same central place, which is of course an added benefit if you're working with different teams within the organization, that you're not just finding a solution for yourself only, but that the solution can work for other departments as well. So typically I would recommend this strategy if you're working for an agency or if you're working for an organization that has a little bit more budget, and if you're working together with different teams that all need the same data. I'm at this moment still trying out different third-party tools, for instance funnel.io, Analytics Canvas, and Supermetrics. So I'm not really ready to share my findings yet. If you're interested in some kind of follow-up video, please leave a comment down below. But based on my limited experience, I can say that this approach still has some limitations. Because the GA4 API does not let you export infinite amount of metrics and dimensions all at once. So you're still exporting separate tables. For instance, a table for your traffic sources and campaign and landing pages, and then a separate table for all your device data, and then a separate table for instance, all the behavior data and all the event data. But I believe if you do a little bit work upfront and make strategic choices on what dimensions and metrics combined you need, that you will be able to work around this issue very smoothly. And also I found that using this method, you probably will have some metrics that are still not exactly right. For instance, on some tools that I tried, the user count was still off. Again, more information about this issue later on in the video. I will explain how you can work around this. So the third strategy is to export raw data from GA4 into BigQuery and then pulling that data from there into Looker Studio. As you might know, GA4 comes with a free export into BigQuery. So you're basically getting the raw data from Google. This means that you have no limitations on what you can do. This is absolutely the most precise way. You have no sampling or whatsoever. And while this may sound as the best solution right away, it does have some downsides. Firstly, if you're working with raw data, that data is probably not suited for using in your dashboard right away. You will miss a lot of metrics, you will miss a lot of dimensions. For instance, time on site, engagement rate. I found that the tables contain only user traffic sources and not the session traffic sources that we're used to in GA4. So basically you will need to add your own processing layer to go from raw data into some kind of table that is usable within Looker Studio. The other downside is that you're not leveraging the modeling that is taking place in GA4 through, for instance, Google Signals and through consent mode. You're only getting the data that is measured. You're not getting the data that is modeled. So if you want to have modeled data in your Looker Studio dashboard, the same way that GA4 handles the data, you will need those models yourself. Also, if you're going this route, you don't have any historical data before the point that you connect GA4 to Looker Studio. If I connect it today, I will get the raw data from today on, but not from yesterday and the day before. So probably, at least at first, you will lack some historical data. And although BigQuery is free up to 1 terabyte of processing and 10 gigabyte of storage, above that, you will need to pay. And especially on larger sites, processing costs can add up. But I believe the biggest downside of this strategy is the knowledge and the work it requires to create and maintain your own processing layer. And therefore I recommend this strategy only if you're a large brand with a big in-house analytics team that is capable of making their own models, making their own processing layers. The rest of this video, I want to take time to show you how you can link your GA4 into Looker Studio using Google Sheets. So I'm back in Looker Studio. I deleted my data sources, I deleted my charts. I'm going to connect GA4 using Google Sheets, and therefore I opened this empty Google Sheet. Under extensions, you can go into add-ons and go into get add-ons. If you look for Google Analytics 4, you will find the Adformatic GA4 add-on. I recommend this add-on to everyone because it's really good. It does cost a little bit of money. It's, at least at the time of recording this video, it's €9 per month or €80 a year. And especially compared to some of the other solutions, I find this very cheap. I already purchased, but if you do not want to purchase, you can try it for free for the first 14 days. So if you've installed the extension, you'll find GA4 reporting for Google Analytics 4 under extensions, and then you can select create report. That will create this sheet. I'm going to delete the first sheet that's there by default. Yeah. So I have a configuration GA4 report. Let's go for the last 7 days. Let's name it demo 1. I'm going to select my own site. I'm going to pull users. So in GA4 we would need active users by session source medium over the last 7 days. I'm going to add the report to the screen, and as soon as I press that, you will find that the settings will be written to the first column. And if that's done, you can go into Run Reports, and this will create a new sheet down below called Demo 1 with all the active users from session source medium on the date range that I selected. Well, now I can pull this data into Looker Studio, not by using this connector, but I'm going to use the Google Sheets connector. Going to connect to my demo spreadsheet. Note that I need to select demo 1, and this is very important. I need to include a specific range. This is always cell A15, and what I like to do is I select A15 up to Z. And by omitting the number, so I do not write Z100, but I'm just writing Z. This will make Looker Studio look into the entire table, no matter how long it is. And also I'm not selecting the column B, but I'm selecting Z, because this will work for every table. And if I add a column later on, I do not need to worry about this range, because this will always work. If I add it, I get exactly what's there, session source medium, and it says record count. I don't want record count, I want active users. And there you go. This is the first column. This is of course very basic. Usually what I really like to do is I don't want a fixed date range. I want to add a date range control somewhere at the top of my dashboard, so people can choose exactly what date range they want to look at. Well, of course, this doesn't work if I select the last 28 days or this year to date. My chart does not update because it doesn't contain any time information. So to achieve that, I need to go back into my demo chart. I'm going to make a new one, so I'm going to create a report. I'm going to call it demo 2. I'm pulling from the same property, but this time I'm going to pull 430 days up to yesterday. This is approximately 14 months. And as you might know, GA4 saves the raw data up to 14 months. So I want to pull that in. I want to select metrics as still active users. And let's go with conversions. And as dimensions, I still want session source, but I also need to select date. And date, I'm going to put it first. And I'm going to sort also on date, ascending, apply. It also doesn't really matter for connecting to Looker Studio, but it makes the sheet a little bit more readable. I'm going to add this report to the sheet. So there you go. And I'm going to click Run Reports. Well, as you can see, there's a new report created with the name Demo2, with the date, the session source medium, active users and the conversions per date. Let's pull this into Looker Studio. So I'm going to delete this one. Resource or add data. I'm going to pull a new Google Sheet. I'm going to pull from the demo. Oh, I need to refresh. This is a good tip. If you do not see your data source right away, just press refresh. That solves a lot of issues in Looker Studio. Add data, go into Google Sheets, demo, demo2. There it is. I need to include the same date range. Again, A15 up to Z. So I'm going to add a chart, a table, and it's based on demo2. It's pulling in the dates, session source medium. I do not want record count. I want to see the active users. And then it says Looker Studio cannot connect to your data set. See details. It no longer exists. This is a small problem that I get sometimes when connecting to Google Sheets. So what we can do, on the right side, we can select refresh data. Sometimes this solves the issue. We can also refresh our entire page. Oh, there it is. Because we have the date range in our table, we can go into our calendar and select, for instance, this year to date. And then this will update with all the data that's there. So the same way we can make a timeline. So we can say time series chart. There you go. Again, I'm using the demo2 because that contains a date column. I can set active users and, for instance, conversions. And if we change the date range, this will also work. So for instance, from last 28 days into the last 7 days, there you go. So if you want to go down this route and use Google Sheets for your Looker Studio dashboard, I have a couple of tips for you to make your life a little bit easier. So I recommend going into incognito mode, especially if you're logged into more than one Google account, because otherwise your GA4 import will not work here. Secondly, if you run into small issues in Looker Studio, what sometimes will help is either refreshing your data here or go into data sources and then edit your data source. You can refresh your fields over here. And if that doesn't work, you can go back into your connection and make it so that the specific range of cells is actually not correct. So reconnect it. And then it will say you have missing fields. You just click apply and then go back and then set the range the way it should be. This will create a hard refresh of that data source and will sometimes fix errors that occur in your dashboard. Because Google Sheets has a limit of 10 million rows, you will need to keep your tables low. So instead of endlessly adding new dimensions and metrics to your existing reports, often the best way of adding a diagram to your dashboard is actually just creating a new sheet here. So instead of editing an existing report and adding dimensions over here, for instance, device, category, often the best way is just going into create new report and then creating a separate sheet for every diagram that you have in your dashboard. By default, the add-on says 10,000 rows as limit, but you can remove this limit and then it will go over that limit up to the point that Google Sheets does not work anymore. Well, usually you will be able to extract about 14 months of data, but in some cases, for instance, if you have a website with many different URLs on the site, this will not work. So let's say, for example, that you have a website with many pages, let's say 25,000, and you want to extract data from GA4 over the last 14 months for every day. You would need about 10 million rows of data, which obviously does not work well in Google Sheets. On larger data sets, especially when you're pulling in many different records over many different days, you might encounter the limits of this solution. What you could try is not pulling data over every day, but just setting in your report, setting a fixed date range and then removing the selector here for that specific sheet. If you want to use these filter options anyway, I recommend that you leave out this date range filter at the top and then opt for a fixed date range instead. So if you're pulling data from GA4 into spreadsheets or into BigQuery and you're not using the raw data option, you're going to run into some issues with your metrics. And I want to take a little bit of time to explain this because I didn't find any information about this on the internet and it was a little bit confusing to me at first. So let's go over what you could expect. Well, first of all, the first issue that you're going to encounter if you're pulling data from GA4 into, for instance, a spreadsheet, is that your user count will be off. And this is maybe a little bit odd at first, but it's really logical. Let's go into this spreadsheet and let's say that I'm pulling data from day 1, day 2 and day 3. And let's say that this site is not very busy. So let's say that I'm the only visitor on this site and I'm going there on the first day, I'm going there on the second day, and I'm visiting also on the third day. Well, if I'm pulling in data from GA4 directly and I'm pulling in data from day 1, it will give me that there is one visitor. And if I'm pulling in data from day 1 until day 3, it will recognize that I'm the same visitor. So it will say that there was one visitor. But if I export this table into Looker Studio, all Looker Studio sees is this table. And if I pull in the data from day 1 until day 3, it will do a sum on this column and it will say that there are 3 users. And to be clear, this user count problem will especially show when you try to add a scorecard with the total amount of users. In some cases, I found that my user count was 8 times more, 10 times more than I saw in GA4. So one thing that I like to do to minimize the amount of doubles in my report is to go under extensions and then create a report. I'm going to call it demo 3 and then only pull in the amount of active users. And you can add any metrics that you like here, but to only use date as a dimension here and not adding other dimensions as well, because the more dimensions I add here, the more doubles I will generate in my report. I'm going to add this report to the sheet and this will allow me to make a scorecard with users that operates in conjunction with the date selector. So it will work if I select it for 7 days or for an entire year, and it will limit the amount of doubles that I have in my report. It will still not be exactly the right amount. So if you still want exactly the right amount, you could fall back to using only the Google Analytics data source for just that scorecard only. So the second thing that probably will not work in your Looker Studio dashboard is using ratios. For instance, engagement rate or conversion rate. Those ratios will probably go off compared to your regular GA4 reports. And again, this might be strange at first, but it's really logical. So let's go into an example, and I'm trying to exaggerate this situation as much as possible because it will show why it doesn't work. Let's say that I have 2 days of data, and on the first day I had 100 sessions, but from those 100 sessions there were 0 engaged sessions. So my engagement rate over that day is 0%. On the second day I had just 1 session, but it was an engaged session, so my engagement rate over that day was 100%. Well, if I'm pulling in the data from this sheet and I say in Looker Studio I want the engagement rate over day 1 until day 2, it will give me an average of this column. So the average of this data is of course 50%. But the average engagement rate over this period was obviously not 50% because almost all users were not engaged. So the way to work around this is by pulling in not the engagement rate, but by pulling in sessions and engaged sessions separately. So that way you can get the sum of this you can get the sum of this and calculate an engagement rate afterwards. So let's go into my report. I'm gonna create a new report to show you how to do this. I'm gonna call it demo 4. I'm gonna select sessions and engaged sessions over the date. I'm gonna sort it by date, ascending, there you go, add report to sheet. I'm gonna click run report. By the way, there's an option here that says skip report. If you do not want it to run every report every time you run it, you can just set this to true. There you go. I just want to run the last report, so I'm gonna leave this empty. There you go. Run report. Look, it will skip the first 3 reports and it will do the 4th report only. Now I have the date and the sessions and the engaged sessions. I can add my last demo. Oh, I need to refresh again. I can add my 4th demo here. Select date range, again, A15 to Z, add. So if I've added my data source, I'm gonna go under Resource, Manage Edit Data Sources. I'm gonna go into my last spreadsheet. I'm gonna click Edit. Here I see my sessions, my engaged sessions, and this is where I add my engagement rate. This I can easily calculate it here by doing sum engaged sessions divided by the sum of the sessions. And I can click save, and then I go back into all fields. I'm going to set the field type of engagement rate to %. Now I can go back into my report. I can add a chart, for instance a scorecard, and I can say the engagement rate was 36%, which is obviously just the amount of engaged sessions divided by the amount of sessions. 14 divided by 22. And yes, this is the right amount. Well, the same trick applies if you want to calculate conversion rate. In that case, you do not need engaged sessions and sessions, but you will need the amount of conversions and the amount of sessions. Alright, that's it for today. That's how you connect your GA4 account to Looker Studio using Google Sheets. I hope this video was really helpful for you. Obviously, there's also a lot more that we can say about this. So if you would like to see a follow-up video, please leave a comment down below. Also, if you like the video, please leave a thumbs up. That really helps me get this channel off the ground. Alright, have a great day and see you in the next video.